Hello there, everyone. My name is Will Jourdain, AA4WJ. I'm a sales representative for Icom America, and I am very happy to be here today to talk to you all about the newest member of the Icom transceiver family, and that is, of course, the IC-705. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. First off, I'd like to take a look at some of the included items that come with the 705 as soon as you get it out of the box. So we'll start off with some of the key features. First of all, the 705 is, of course, an all-band, all-mode radio. So HF 6 meters, 2 meters, and 440. And then AM, FM, single sideband of both upper and lower, of course. CW, RIDI, and DV. DV for digital voice. For us today, that will usually mean D-Star. The radio is a QRP rig and is capable of 5 watts of output power when using the clip-in battery pack and 10 watts of output power when we give it 13.8 volts, just like what you'd have coming out of your standard power supply that you likely already have in your shack. It is an SDR as well, is the 705, an RF direct sampling receiver up to 25 megahertz. So we like to see that. We like to see the continuation of the Icom SDR family here in the 705. You can see the size and the weight there on screen as well. It is quite light and quite small as well. Makes it easy to take with you when you go. It does feature a 4.3-inch color touchscreen. And this will be familiar to anyone out there who has used an IC-7300 or an IC-9700. And familiarity was going to be one of our main themes for the presentation today. So you're going to hear me use that word a lot. But it's one of my favorite things about Icom radios is the continuity that we bring to the table with our user interfaces over multiple radios and even multiple generations of radios sometimes. So keep your ears open for that. But then also we have some nifty new features as well, things like wireless LAN and Bluetooth, and we're going to talk more about those later on, so don't worry. We're going to spend some time digging deeper on those. But before we move on, a few other things to mention. We do have an integrated GPS unit in the 705. It lives just here in the top of the radio above the screen. And does some nifty things for us and should be maybe familiar to some of you out there who have used other Icom rigs from recent memory. And so with that, we will continue on here and take a quick little tour around the outside of the radio so that I can show you what it has to offer. So we'll start with the left side panel here, and we see the antenna connector. This is a BNC or bayonet style, as you may sometimes hear it called. And this is your singular antenna connector. It's where all the RF comes in and goes out. Just below it here, we have the speaker mic connector. This is the same style connector as we have used in our portable radios, at least many of our portable radios. Things like the 51 series and the 31 series of handhelds. And it is a 2-prong style, a 3.5 millimeter and a 2.5 millimeter stereo jack, respectively. And we like this style a whole lot in the 705 because the 705 does have its own front-firing speaker. And so what you can do with this 2-prong configuration is unplug the speaker jack and either rely on the 705's own front-firing speaker or of course, interface your own external speaker should you so choose. A little versatility there for you. We've got a ground lug here, standard chassis ground, nothing too fancy. And then finally here we have the micro SD card slot. Now, I will pause here and talk a little bit more about what the SD card is bringing to the table for us, because I always recommend interfacing an SD card with your Icom radio if it can accept one. You can do many things, the first of which would be you're able to save your settings. So once you get the radio set up and configured how you like it, you can save those settings parameters onto the SD card so that you can load them back into the radio if you ever lose them going forward. And this is important because you also use the SD card to update your firmware. And When you do update your firmware, what will happen is that all of your settings will be put back to factory default. So if you went ahead and saved those settings ahead of time, no worries. You're going to be good to go. You can just load them right back into the radio and pick up right back where you left off. Very powerful. Continuing on to the right-hand side of the radio here, this is where the rest of our I/O lives. So you can see the send and ALC jack here for interfacing a linear, should you so choose. The tuner jack for interfacing an external tuner, should you so choose. And Icom has recently come out with the companion tuner for the 705, and I will show that to you a little bit later on for those curious to take a look at it. The CW key jack is right here. Worth noting that this is a 3.5 millimeter and not a 1/4 inch, so bear that in mind as you're wiring up your paddles, or that you may need an adapter of some kind. The DC power jack, so of course we mentioned the radio will give us 10 watts of output power when interfaced with 13.8 volt DC, and this is where you would do that, where you would bring that 13.8 volts in. And the 705 does come with a power cable which terminates in bare ends to make it nice and easy to connect up to your good old power supply, or battery of some kind should you so choose as well. And then finally here, the micro USB connector lives down here at the bottom. And again, like with the SD card, I will pause and mention a few things about the micro USB connector, because it brings a lot of functionality to the table for us. The first and most obvious is PC connectivity, right? So we can plug the 705 into our PC for things like rig control and programming. But then the radio also has a built-in sound card as well, which is tied to this USB port. So we can leverage that for our HF digital mode enthusiasts out there. We don't need external sound card devices anymore. Rig blasters and signal links, all they are external sound cards. And so now that we have one internal built into the radio, we can get rid of those kinds of devices in our setup and streamline things just a little bit more. We'll continue on here and take a quick look at the back side of the radio. This is where the clip-in battery pack lives. And again, to use this term, I hope it looks familiar to some of you, because this is the same style battery as we have used in some of our handheld radios in the past, things like the 51 series and the 31 series of handhelds. And indeed, we use this style of battery in some of our commercial radios as well on the other sides of our product lines. So this is where it clips in. The BP272 here is the one that will come with your radio, and it is 1850 milliamps. And there's also a larger size available, a BP307, which weighs in at 3,000 milliamps, quite large. And those are the two that we recommend for use with the 705, either the included 272 or the optional 307. There is a smaller size available in this style, style of configuration. We do not recommend that one, though, for the 705, because the 705 was designed around the power characteristics of the larger two. So you're going to get a 272, the middle child with the radio, and then the big boy is available as an option. And down here at the bottom, you can see noted tripod screw hole. And we'll take a quick look at that as we view the final side of the radio, which is the bottom. So this is that tripod screw hole, which you'll sometimes hear referred to as a camera mount. Very common connector out there in the world. It's a 1/4-20 threading for those interested in that kind of thing. And because it is so very common, what that means for us is that there are all kinds of accessories out there which will interface with this provision to allow you to mount the 705 in a variety of different locations, places like in the car or in a go box, in the comms van, etc. But if the camera mount does not match your needs, then you do have an alternative in the form of these 4 holes around the perimeter here. This is an industry standard pattern called an AMPS pattern, and because it is an industry standard, Similar to the camera mount, that means that there are an absolute wealth of accessories out there that interface perfectly with those 4 holes, again, to give you just that much more variety in your mounting solutions, so that you can find the right way to stick the 705 in place where you need it to be. And that concludes the 10-cent tour of the outside of the radio. So let's move on to the fun part. Let's start talking about what the radio can do. And first off, I would like to talk to you a little bit about D-Star. D-Star is, of course, included in the 705 right out of the box. And you can see a pretty good representation of what D-Star operation will look like in the 705 here in the image to the right. So in the top of the image, you see what is called DR mode. DR stands for digital repeater mode, but for our purposes here today, you can think of it as D-Star mode, because what this does is comprise all of the commands that you need for navigating through the D-Star system. It is the most streamlined and easiest way to do so, and we highly recommend that folks that have not tried DR mode in their D-Star radios give it a go. You'll find it in the majority of current production Icom radios, and it'll feel familiar to you because it's almost always going to look and operate exactly like you see here. You'll have your to field and your from field, and then again, all of the commands that you need for navigating through D-Star live in one of these 2 fields. Makes it quite easy. You just tap on the field you need, and the kind of settings pop up in a list, and you can change them depending on how you need things set up. So it's very easy and very streamlined, and once you know how to use it in one radio, you're gonna pick it up in no time flat in other radios going forward. The 705 is interesting in that it is now just the 2nd radio in production that is capable of transmitting D-Star on HF. The other one, of course, being the IC-705. And so that's some sort of unique functionality for this radio. It is capable of transmitting the D-Star, a D-Star signal on the HF bands. And so that's quite neat. There's a group of guys out there who like toying around with that. You can find them on the air most weekends, just working their way up the bands and trying out D-Star and seeing who they can hear. We also have a pre-programmed repeater list inside of the radio from the factory, and we can utilize the built-in GPS. So you can see here in the top of the image the indicator which shows us that we have a GPS lock. And when we do have a GPS lock, the radio is able to pop up a list of nearby repeaters to our location for us to select from. And it does, of course, as I said, work with the pre-programmed list, but it is worth noting that you can associate latitude and longitude coordinates with your analog repeaters as you're programming them in. And in so doing, the radio is then able to pop up those analog machines in the nearby repeater list for you as well. So very nifty, and saves you some time, especially if you travel a lot or if you're taking the 705 with you out on the road. It makes it very easy to find the closest machine so that you can get on the air and not waste time trying to figure out where you need to be. So we like that a lot. And then some newer features in the 705, newer and returning features, terminal and access point modes. So these, in essence, are there for folks who are not in range of a D-Star repeater. So what you can do is connect the 705 to your PC with that USB port that we've mentioned already. And then you have access to these 2 modes. Terminal mode allows you to have the radio connected to your PC and utilize your PC's internet connection to talk to the D-Star network. So you use the microphone just plugged into the radio like it would be ordinarily, and the radio is connected to your PC. And so you key the mic just like you normally would, but instead of going out an antenna, the signal is going to your PC and out over the internet to the D-Star system. And that's terminal mode. Access point mode takes it kind of one step farther back, a little bit more removed. We leave the 705 connected to our PC, but instead of using the attached microphone, we instead talk to the radio with another D-Star radio of some kind, be it a handheld or a mobile, just any other D-Star radio. And then from there, the principle is the same. Instead of going out an antenna, we go to the PC over its internet connection to the world. And there you have it. And then the newest feature to D-Star, and a feature that has been enhanced somewhat in the 705, is the ability to send images. And that, of course, is what you see here in the bottom half of the image on screen. And this, again, is not brand spanking new, but it is, again, enhanced with the 705. You can see the screen that allows you to send those pictures. But why do I say it's enhanced? Well, previously with this feature, you had to put the image. You have to get the image onto the radio somehow, right? So previously, the way that was accomplished was with the SD card. And you can still do that with the 705, but the 705 has Bluetooth. Don't forget, as we said. So what we can do is we can have some fun with some mobile applications that talk to our 705 via Bluetooth. So I'll go in a bit of a reverse order here, bear with me here, but we already talked about the ability to send photos. So I'd like to start by telling you about the ST4001 that you see here on the right. This is the dedicated picture utility application. And so what it allows us to do is, well, it allows us to do things like edit the image. Now, you can always take a picture with your phone and then edit it with, a third-party photo editing application of your choice, and then bring it over to the ST4001. And then from there, you can do some further editing. You can superimpose some text, change the colors and things like this. You can also notably crop the image to maintain the aspect ratio of the radio's own screen. This is why I do recommend going through the ST4001 through this process, because you can scale the image appropriately for the radio screen, which is notable. And then from there, you send the picture to the radio via Bluetooth. Now, it is worth noting that you do still have to have an SD card in the radio for this to work. The radio itself does not have enough memory to store these images unless it has that SD card. Excuse me, so just bear that in mind. You do need the SD card plugged in. But after that, it will work quite easily. And so that's the ST4001 in a nutshell. The RS-MS3 here is pretty simple. It is designed specifically for use with terminal and access point modes that we just talked about. And this guy is designed to provide internet to the 705. So where we talked about having the radio connected to a PC, well, now we can remove that wire and instead feed the 705 an internet signal wirelessly using our phone and the RS-MS3. So pretty powerful stuff, and we love taking wires out of the equation. We love to do it whenever we can. And then finally here, we've got our jack of all trades app, the RS-MS1. And this guy does, again here, just a little bit of everything. So it is capable of sending images, just like the ST4001 is. However, it does lack the editing capabilities that the ST4001 brings to the table. So I still recommend the ST4001 if the picture stuff is what you're most interested in, but the RS-MS1 does a lot on top of that. So up here you can see DR mode, just like I mentioned on the last screen. It looks similar here to how it did in the 705 itself, the to field and the from field, and then again, all of the commands for navigating the D-Star system live within these two fields. So it allows you to control the radio. It allows you to control the radio, of course, in DR mode here, in D-Star mode, as we have mentioned, but it also allows you to control the radio in analog mode as well. Things like your power output, your frequencies, your mode, duplex, split, things like that, all controllable here with the RS-MS1. And then on top of that, other nifty things like the ability to see an actual visual representation of that nearby repeater list that I mentioned earlier. Picture's worth 1,000 words, kind of the theme of this slide here and the previous. So we like to be able to see everything in one glance, and we're allowed to do just exactly that with the RS-MS1. So very nifty, very powerful stuff. And finally here, just before we move on, all of these apps are free. These are free downloads from the app stores noted on screen. So I'd encourage you guys to check them out. If you haven't already. They're a lot of fun. And of course, all of those apps rely on Bluetooth, the Bluetooth connection that we've talked about a little bit. And so now I'd like to take some more time to talk about that in some more detail. The Bluetooth and wireless LAN built in. We all know Bluetooth at this point. It's fairly ubiquitous in our lives, but I did want to show you what it looks like. So here's the pairing screen. I took this image from my own radio. After I had paired a couple devices. UE Boom is an external Bluetooth speaker, and then Will's AirPods are just a pair of Apple AirPods, which are, of course, just some wireless earbuds, and they both paired up very, very easily. And you can see here that both of these devices have actually been recognized by the 705 as headsets. The UE Boom here, the AirPods kind of speak for themselves, but the UE Boom, my speaker in particular, has a speakerphone functionality, and so the radio was able to recognize that and denotes it as such. It is able to recognize these devices as headsets because we are using very, very standard industry protocols for Bluetooth. There's nothing proprietary in the way that we have implemented Bluetooth in the 705. And so what that means for us is that the vast majority of Bluetooth devices should work and be compatible with this radio. I can't guarantee that every Bluetooth device ever manufactured will be, but my luck has been quite good, and I would wager that yours will be as well. And then to answer the question that I know you're asking, yes, you can use these to transmit. If they have a microphone and the radio recognizes that microphone, you're able to transmit with them. The catch is, of course, that most of these kinds of devices do not usually have a PTT, and so you need to leave the radio in box if that's what you're after. But it can be done, and I have done it, and I've gotten pretty good audio reports too from the old AirPods. So made me pretty happy, pretty jazzed. And so that's Bluetooth. That's kind of the 10,000-foot overview. Talks to your phone, talks to headphones and headsets and things like that. But what about wireless LAN? What the heck is that doing in my radio? And the answer is a lot of things. First off, though, this is the connection screen. Nothing too different from what you're used to seeing in just about any other device under the sun. Internet Junior here at the top is my home Wi-Fi network, and you can see other ones that are nearby to me. You just tap on it, tap on the screen, type in your password like you normally would, and bingo bango, you're off to the races connected to the internet. But what do you do? What do you do with it from there? The question remains, and the answer is control. You can control the radio, and more specifically, you can wirelessly control the radio. So this is what you're seeing on screen is the graphic interface for the Icom RS-BA1 version 2 software. The version 2 is the only version currently available on the market, so that's where we'll focus our attention today. And it is rig control software, and more specifically, it is remote control software. So the sort of general standard setup for RS-BA1 would be like this. You would have the radio connected via USB to a PC that's in the shack. And that PC in the shack is running the RS-BA1 software and would be what we would refer to in this setup as the server. You would then load the RS-BA1 on another computer, ideally a laptop or something portable, and take it with you on vacation or out of town or wherever you're going. From there, you can log back into your home network with the proper network configuration and talk to that server PC that's connected to your radio. And because the two are connected, the PC can then control the radio. So you're remote controlling your radio. You're talking from your laptop to the PC in the shack, which is connected to the radio, and the radio is controlled. That is the sort of general chain of command for the RS-BA1 and how it works. However, the 705 is doing some pretty nifty stuff. It is actually running the server for the RS-BA1 on board. It hosts the server inside of itself, so we can completely remove that PC in the shack from the equation. The example remains otherwise exactly the same. So that would be, we have the laptop with us on vacation. We talk back to the 705, which is connected to our Wi-Fi at home, and from there we can control the radio because it's got the RSBA1 server on board. It's able to understand the commands without having an extra computer attached in the mix, and so there you have it. And it is worth noting that this can all be done locally as well. So the example I gave you was kind of a remote setup, but you can do all of this just in the house as well. No need to be far and wide. The radio can be down in the shack, and you can be up in the easy chair watching TV and have a have a laptop next to you and listen to and control the radio just like you were sitting directly in front of it. So pretty nifty stuff. And it got even niftier with a recent firmware update. You can see I tease it down there, version 1.20. But I've got a whole slide for that here in a second, so we will get there in just a moment. But first, I would like to talk to you about some digital modes. Digital modes for HF. We've already talked about D-Star, so let's talk about our HF digital modes. So we've already talked about the PC connection and the built-in sound card, but I did want to take a little bit of time just to show you very quickly what it looks like when you operate in these modes. So this is the RTTY Decode screen. Should be familiar to those of you who have used the 7300. It is all but identical. And then this is your RTTY memory. So this is how you actually send RTTY with the 705. These are customizable, of course, to your taste, and you just tap on it, and it sends it out over the air. And that's great. We like RTTY. RTTY is a lot of fun, but we also like other digital modes as well. You guys may have heard of this little mode called Ft8. It seems to be getting some traction here lately, and we have too. We've heard of Ft8 as well, and we know that a lot of folks like it. And we also know that a lot of folks sometimes had trouble getting it set up properly. And so with our latest firmware update, version 1.20, we added something very, very nifty. And so let's talk real quick about that firmware update and all of the things that it brought. And before I dive too deep on it here, I want to say that all of my 7300 and 9700 users out there should also take note here. Because a lot of these same features that I'm about to talk about were recently brought to those two radios, 7300, 9700 as well. So if you have not updated your firmware since around January, February of this year, 2021, please do so, because this is a big one. This one is worth your time and worth the little bit of effort that it is to go ahead and do it. So here's what the firmware update screen will look like when you do it. I like to show this because I like to note that when you see this screen, you need to press and hold on the button that says yes, just for a second or two, but a quick press won't do it. So just a note there, when you go to update your firmware, press and hold on that yes button, and then you'll see a little progress bar crawl across. The radio will power cycle itself, and you are all good to go. So version 1.20, the version numbers for the 7300 and the 9700 are different. So just make sure you find the latest one. Go to, just do a Google search, honestly, is the easiest way for Icom firmware update, and it should take you right there. But the version numbers will be different from radio to radio, so just bear that in mind. But some of the new features added are Scrolling Waterfall, which I'm going to put a hold on and talk to you about in a bit, because it's one of my favorites. Ft8 Settings Preset, button customization, and those are the main three that are added to all three of the radios, 705, 7300, 9700. And then unique for the 705 is support for the AH705 auto tuner, which I'll show you here in just a sec, and wireless LAN access point mode. So don't get this confused with terminal and access point modes that we talked about back on the D-Star screen. What wireless LAN access point mode allows us to do is all of those things that we were able to do via Bluetooth, so talking to our applications, sending photos, controlling the radio with the applications, etc. Those things can now be done over wireless LAN as well. So pretty nifty, and means you don't have to be in Bluetooth range. Now you just have to be on the same Wi-Fi network as the radio, and you can do all those things that we mentioned. but the big ones. So we'll start at the bottom here. Button customization. You can now customize some of the hard buttons on the front of the radio. If you don't need the auto-tune button or zero beat or what have you, you can have those buttons turn themselves into something different. There are a lot of options customizable to your taste, so it's worth taking a look and seeing what to see. We're all different, and we all use our radios differently, so it's nice to have options. And then probably the biggest one, the one that'll be most exciting to most folks, is the Ft8 Settings Preset. So I went ahead and took a little screenshot, of what that looks like here. And you can see this is a screen that you will not have access to in your radio until you do this firmware update. It has not existed up until this point. It gives us the option to select Ft8 as our operating mode. And what this will do is it will flip a bunch of the parameters in the radio, a bunch of the settings over to be what is needed for Ft8 operation. So it makes it nice and easy, all but a one-button setup for Ft8. You'll still need to set up the software appropriately, of course, and maybe a few tweaks here and there. But by and large, this is going to get you 99% of the way towards where you need to be to operate Ft8, which is fantastic because it also means that it's going to be very easy for us to go back to normal operating mode. And then, because we love you, we went ahead and added a few blank spaces down here as well, about 4 blank spaces. You can see the 2, and then there are 2 more down below for whatever you like. So if you like to have the radio set up differently when you're doing CW versus when you're doing phone, or when you're contesting versus when you're Sunday morning rag chewing, you can do that now. And you can switch between those settings parameters with a simple push of a button. This used to be something that you could kind of quasi-do with the SD card. I mentioned you were able to save your settings. So you could save multiple settings parameters and load those in from the SD card, and it worked. It worked well. But now we've taken some of that out of some of those steps out of the mix and just added a screen dedicated to exactly doing what we described there. So we love it. I love it, at least. I hope you do too. And it's, again, one of the big reasons why this firmware update is extremely worth your time to do if you have not already. And then finally here, the Scrolling Waterfall I mentioned. It is one of my most favorite additions. This, candidly here, folks, is how I've wanted the waterfall to work since day one. The waterfall has had 2 modes previously, centered and fixed mode, which were selectable via this button down here. You press and hold on it, or rather you just quick tap on it and it would switch between the 2. But now, if you press and hold on this button after doing the firmware update, you get what is called scroll mode. You can see that here in orange at the top of our scope. And what that does is it allows us to operate on band edges. So you can see here we're on 14.200 is our center frequency, and I've got the radio configured for plus and minus 10 on our center frequency. So 14.19 up to 14.21. And traditionally, if we had been in fixed mode, we'd have these same band edges. And when I scrolled, once I got to 14.211, my cursor would disappear off the screen. I wouldn't be able to see it until I scrolled back into within the span here noted. And that was not ideal for a lot of folks. And so what we have done is we've added scroll mode. So we continue to operate in band edges, but now when you scroll past one of your edges, the edges change. So the emphasis here, the highlight is mine. This will not be on your radio screen, don't worry. But you can see here in the second image, I scrolled up to 14.211. The frequency readouts momentarily get a little bit bigger, or the band edge readouts rather get a little bit bigger to show you that they've changed. And so here you can see we're still on plus and minus 10. So we've got 14.21, which used to be our right-hand boundary, is now our left-hand boundary. And our new right-hand boundary is still 10 up from our center at 14.23. So your span stays the same, but it follows you along as you scroll. So instead of losing sight of your cursor and having to wonder where it is or wonder what the spectrum around it looks like, because that's what the waterfall is for, of course, you now can always see it, and it's fantastic. It's the mode that my waterfall personally will stay in from now until the end of time, and I highly encourage you all to check it out and give it a try as well, because it's really, really a great addition to what was already a fantastic feature in the waterfall pan adapter. And then finally here, we're coming towards the end of the presentation, so thank you for bearing with me. But as promised, I wanted to show you one of our newest products, and that is the AH-705. This is the companion antenna tuner for the 705. So you can see here, nothing too fancy, nothing too complicated. You've got singular BNC as the RF input to match the BNC on the 705 itself. So it makes interfacing very easy with just the BNC to BNC pigtail. Control for connecting to the radio to that tuner jack that we saw way back when we looked around the outside of the rig. And then DC input for giving it some power. And then, of course, your antenna output is standard SO239. Since most of the types of antennas we're going to need a tuner for, they're going to terminate in the PL259. And then, of course, ground is a wing nut to make it nice and easy to ground this bad boy, should you so desire. It's a little bit hard to gauge the size of the thing, I know, from the images here on your screen, but it is roughly the same footprint size as the 705, maybe a little bit bigger, and about half the height as the radio sits on the table with the screen up. So there you go, the AH-705 available now from your favorite amateur radio retailer of choice. Give them a call and see what they've got in stock. And then finally, we've reached the penultimate slide here. And I wanted to talk to you guys. I would be remiss, in fact, if I did not talk to you guys about the battery life. It was probably the biggest question that we got about the 705 before it was released on the market. And so I like to talk about it here in this presentation. The 705 is doing a lot of work behind the scenes to help make sure that you get the most talk time out of your batteries. So all kinds of features available to you to help save the battery life. First of all, probably my favorite is just the quick screen off feature. So you can quick press on the power button. A long press will turn the radio on or off respectively, but the quick press will just turn the screen off. So the indicator light here goes amber, but you can see the TXRX light over here is still green. So the radio is still receiving, and indeed the radio will still transmit. And further, the radio is actually still active. It can be tuned. If you bump the VFO knob, you'll move yourself off frequency. So I'd recommend putting, locking the screen, locking the VFO knob before you put it into this mode. But this will save you a lot of battery, turning the screen off. And then other features as well that you can turn off through internal settings if you do not need them are the GPS, the wireless LAN, and the Bluetooth. All of these are primary suspects for current consumption. And so if you do not need them, I recommend turning them off. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you do need your GPS coordinates and you're not going to be moving, you can actually have the radio import your current GPS latitude, longitude as a manual location, so that you can turn the GPS off but still have that lat-long info in the radio and accessible to you, again, if it's needed. If you do need the GPS active while you're moving, then you need to leave it turned on, of course. But you do have options to save that battery. And then finally here, just a shout out to the boys over at Amateur Logic TV, the venerable George and Tommy. Shot a video with Ray Novak of Icom showing a lot of this in action. It's, in fact, where I got this screen capture from that video, and they do exactly what it looks like they did. They hook the 705 up to the good old fluke here, and then they go down this list, start turning stuff off, turning it back on, and letting you see in real time what it does to the current consumption of the battery. So highly recommend checking out Amateur Logic TV just in general, and then also specifically this video, the IC-705 minimum current tweaks, if you're interested in that kind of thing. And then if you are interested in that kind of thing, I will say get out there and don't stop at just Amateur Logic. Get out there and see what else is going on the web. Things are starting to get back to normal here a little bit more in our lives, which is absolutely fantastic. But as we moved our way through this past year, amateur radio really shined, and the amateur radio community online really shined and came up into its own. There are all kinds of great YouTube channels out there. I've listed some here. By no means is this all of them. I could not have begun to fit all of them in a single slide. So I highly recommend getting out there and getting engaged with the community online. Of course, get back engaged with the community in person just as soon as you can, as soon as it's safe. But also, there's a great wealth of resources for us out there on the web. Places like YouTube, they're making such fantastic content, hours upon countless hours of marvelous amateur radio content for us to watch and enjoy and learn from. And then places like Facebook and other user groups allow us to share our knowledge and leech upon the knowledge of others to enhance our enjoyment of our hobby and spread the love of amateur radio. And then blogs and things like this. There are plenty of places out there where folks are talking about what they're doing in the hobby and what they're enjoying, and some of the things that they've learned through their journey in amateur radio. So, as LeVar Burton said in Reading Rainbow back in the day, don't just take my word for it. Get out there and see what your fellow hams are saying about the 705, about Icom in general, about amateur radio in general. And I bet that you will find a lot of stuff to love out there. And so with that concludes my presentation here, my slide deck. And so I will throw it back to everyone in the audience for some questions. So thank you for your time, everyone.